History and historians arm American citizens with events and experiences that caution them to think about their government as one of history's best examples of dystopian rule. In addition to the historians and watchdogs of the political community, artists and writers have cautioned citizens to be wary of the dystopian government in which they live. In effect, the United States has always functioned as a dystopia, and has resorted to surveilling its people and abridging their rights in order to maintain power. For the last 15 years, Americans have struggled to overcome an endless onslaught of government-espoused fear. The terrorist attacks on the 11th of September 2001, or 9/11, granted the American government a degree of freedom, which it has enjoyed on occasion, to legally meddle in citizens' lives. Principally through fear-mongering, the government has been able to set forth and enact legislation that legitimizes its decision to spy on its citizens potentially in perpetuity. Since 9/11, several governmental policies have been enforced in order to combat other potential terror attacks at the cost of personal liberties. The United States government rocketed its tax paying masses into a series of unnecessary frivolous wars in the Middle East. One of the most notorious pieces of legislation that has shaped this recent dystopian legal history is the USA Patriot Act, which George W. Bush signed into effect on the 26th of October 2001, a mere 45 days after the terror attacks in Manhattan. The Patriot Act allows an unreasonable degree of governmental infringement on citizens' personal information and the deprivation of citizens' constitutional rights. Of specific concern here are the two sections of the Patriot Act, namely, Sections 214 and 215 of this legislation, which enlarged the capacity of the government, under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 2000, to both conduct pen register trap and trace surveillance and compel production of business records. The Act states, Americans may be jailed without being charged or being able to confront witnesses against them. Moreover, the Patriot Act has enjoyed an eerie amount of credence by virtue of its name, which has played on the emotions of millions of Americans whose emotionally raw exposure to boundless government fear-mongering since 9/11 has left them caught in a dilemma, protecting civil liberties and personal freedom, or ceding these for the sake of national security. Today, the effects of the Patriot Act yet loom large. For instance, the FBI can clandestinely collect tangible things, personal information on many levels. Also, the FBI can issue national security letters, or NSLs. These NSLs can demand your personal information without a court order. Finally, the government can break into citizens' homes by using so-called sneak and peek warrants. Although such warrants do not specifically allow for the seizure of personal assets, they have been proven unnecessary by statistics. Only 0.8% of cases where it was used related to terrorism. In Ray Bradbury's novel Fahrenheit 451, the reigning dystopian government forbids its people to read books. When in the hands of the people, the contents of the books potentially pose a threat to the established order. This is precisely why the fictitious dystopian government invests itself so heavily in inhibiting its people from reading. The fearful attitude that the dystopian government from Fahrenheit 451 has regarding its citizens happens also to be common to the United States of America, and particularly with regards to America's war on drugs. In 1972, Richard Nixon established a Republican-led committee to determine whether the public would be better served by the legalization or criminalization of marijuana. The result, the commission recommended that marijuana use should be decriminalized. Nixon, after hearing this, chose to continue down his tax-guzzling warpath, and along with him, he chose to drag all Americans. This recommendation so angered President Nixon that he refused to receive the report publicly. Far from being a moral issue whatsoever in 2016 America, cultivating, industrializing, merchandising, and utilizing marijuana are very much states' rights issue. Manipulating the legality of marijuana in America mirrors the relationship that people in Fahrenheit 451 have with books and a government that, for the sake of its own interests, bans them to create an excuse to harass people just to maintain power. In the short story Harrison Bergeron, Harrison, the protagonist after whom the story receives its title, speaks out against the government on national television, expressing himself via the erotically demonstrative art of dance, and he is literally shot dead by the head of the state, otherwise known as the handicapper general. In a similar vein, Edward Snowden, the 21st century's whistleblowing champion of democracy, has spoken out against the dystopian spying of the American government, a crime potentially punishable by death. Snowden, unlike Harrison Bergeron, has yet to be executed for his crimes of free speech. Yet, perhaps the most dystopian part of the Snowden situation in sum is that the United States has, over its relatively brief history of existence as a nation-state, constructed its legal code around stopping whistleblowers from ever taking action in the first place. The Founding Fathers certainly envisaged an America where free speech would not effectively threaten the establishment or endanger the ruling elite. For that matter, they created their new government precisely in the image and likeness of their class, the economic and political elitists whose interests required the dominion by eliminating free speech by passing the Sedition Act of 1798. The act gave power to the government to penalize any dissenting voices about the government. In continuation of their legacy, Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. He rounded up virtually 38,000 prisoners that were put into political gulags for expressing their deep-seated doubts about the war he was commanding. In conclusion, the United States of America has proven itself to be a veritable dystopia and makes no apologies for this totalitarian. The Magna Carta revolutionized the protection of people against the executive powers of their government. It provided a new idea, where one is innocent until proven guilty, yet in a dystopia, the government always presumes one is guilty. Were this not the case, there would be no need for constant surveillance, a war on civil liberties, and dissent, such as in the American dystopia. Arguably, it is not beyond common sense, in enlightened self-interest, to assume the same attitude as their government. Citizens under the American government should then, in turn, assume that their government is the guilty party. America needs not to create a Frankenstein to replace the one it already has. The people do not need to worry about toppling a government, but rather creating an institution that could change directions civilly. This fourth branch of government would be run by directly elected servants without the influence of outside donors into the elections. This branch would have access to the inner workings of the other three branches of government and be able to report their findings to the people. In essence, it would function as a daily, public audit, and disseminate its findings in the public sphere. This is a necessary step because, whether it be legally breaking and entering into homes, spying on its citizens, or condemning people for exercising their right to free speech, America, the land of the free, is the quintessential dystopia of modern times.